Well, good morning. I'm Ryan White. I'm the family pastor here at River's Edge Church, and it is my joy and honor to be walking through this next step in our journey through the Gospel of John. So if you need a Bible or if you need a pen to fill out your sermon notes, raise your hand, and one of our ushers can get you what you need. We want you to be able to fully engage this morning and hear what the Word God has for you. So this morning we're going to talk about hospitality. The definition of hospitality is literally to receive guests and entertain strangers. It's not a word we really use that much in our culture today. Sure, we sometimes thank people for their hospitality. That's usually because they've invited us into their home and they've served us a home-cooked meal. We also talk about something called the hospitality industry, which is like hotels and things like that. Kind of our homes away from home, these places of lodging where we can find rest and refreshment in the midst of our travels. You walk into one of those establishments and someone says, "Hey, can I carry your bags for you to your room? Here, take a seat, enjoy a complimentary cup of coffee and a freshly baked cookie." That's pretty much in the States what we mean when we say that word hospitality. But in the ancient Middle East, hospitality was a much bigger deal. It was considered one of the highest virtues. It was esteemed even over being a good neighbor. And it was so ingrained in their culture that it showed up in their architecture. Even the poorest peasant home, which were usually just two-room affairs, one of those rooms was solely dedicated to entertaining guests. And a symbol of hospitality in ancient Israel was this: a basin of water and a towel. Any kind of host worth his salt would offer his guests the opportunity to wash their feet after a long journey. And it kind of makes sense because travel in the ancient world was brutal, at least compared to what things are today. Almost everyone got around on foot, wearing nothing more than leather sandals, Birkenstocks. I feel like this is still the same model Jesus probably rocked. At least that's what they told me in the Birkenstock store when I bought them. But, so you're in the desert heat, you're trekking across hot, dusty, dirt and stone roads, and a day's journey, get this was actually a unit of measurement back then, a day's journey was, how long do you imagine your average traveler could travel in a day? What? 15? No, it's higher. It was 20 to 25 miles is what's considered an average day's journey. That's your great aunt Edna, when she's going to visit for the holidays, is going 20 to 25 miles on foot. We have gotten so soft. It makes a road trip with the kids or a long international flight kind of sound like a cakewalk. And probably if it were up to me, being someone with 3 kids, I don't know if I'd ever travel if we had to do it on foot 20 miles a day with kids. That would be crazy. But imagine and envision how sore and dusty and sweaty and caked with dirt your feet would be after a long day on the road. And imagine that sense of joy and relief when someone threw open the door and said, "Hey, friend, come, get off your feet, rest. There's food at the table. But first, have a seat. Take your tired feet and wash. Be renewed." In the hot, warm water they would give you to wash your feet would be like a little taste of heaven. And if your host was wealthy, or particularly hospitable or extravagant in their hospitality. They'd actually hire a servant to wash your feet for you. It was a little added luxury. And this was because the host, wanting to be hospitable, also didn't want to do the dirty work himself. It was seen in the ancient world as a menial and kind of a nasty job to wash feet. It was reserved only for those who were for lowly, or actually a lot of immigrant labor washed feet. And we get it. There's an ick factor when it comes to feet, right? Feet can be nasty. But there's also something cultural going on here as well. It was seen as deeply insulting, and it still is in the Middle East, to expose someone to the bottom of your shoe or to the sole of your feet. So while foot washing is this mark of hospitality, it's a little rough on the one washing your feet. They get exposed to kind of a lot of disrespect, not to mention your kind of fungally gross toes. So usually, the standard practice would be for the guest to provide water for you to wash your own feet. And that was kind of this cornerstone of hospitality in ancient Israel. Now, I give you all of this kind of historical and cultural background because our passage today doesn't really make sense without it. Foot washing is front and center to this Jesus story, but I think with this little bit of background, I think we're now equipped to dive back into God's Word and hear what Jesus might have to say to us today. So if you could, we're in John chapter 13, and we'll start in verse 1. Now before the feast of Passover, when Jesus knew that his hour had come to depart out of this world to the Father, having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. So let me set the scene. Jesus and his disciples are in Jerusalem. They've traveled south from Galilee because they want to celebrate the Passover feast one final time together in the holy city. Jesus' death is kind of looming large in his mind. He's only hours away from the end game. He's hours away from the cross. And so this scene, it has these kind of climactic overtones. This is Jesus' last opportunity to spend quality time with his beloved disciples. And they're gathered in this large upper guest room in a wealthy home. And he sees and he realizes, I have time for one final lesson, one final interaction with them. And this is what he decides to do. During supper, when the devil had already put it into the heart of Judas Iscariot, Simon's son, to betray him, Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands and that he had come from God and was going back to God, he rose from supper. He laid aside his outer garments and, taking a towel, tied it around his waist. Then he poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet and wipe them with the towel that was wrapped around him. The scene is charged with drama. Jesus knows. He's come to this full realization that he is the one. He's Neo for you Matrix fans out there. He's the long-awaited Savior. And he's discharged his duty. He's loved his own who are in the world. He's taught them. He's healed their diseases. He's shared with them his life and his wisdom and his joy and his mission. And now the end game has come. It says the Father's given him all things into his hands. He's received ultimate authority and power. He knows he had come from God and he's about to go back to God victorious. And he's in this moment of his arrival, this culmination of his life and his career. And in this moment, he does the unthinkable. He uses this final moment to wash his disciples' sweaty, gross, travel-soiled feet. Honestly, it's a little surprising that they've gotten this deep into the Passover meal without having washed their feet. Almost everyone in that culture, when you come in, you wash your feet before entering a house. You've been on the dusty and dirty roads. But somehow they've missed it. And I kind of have a theory. They've essentially rented this guest room for their Passover festivities. So there's no one there to play host for them. So you know who should have probably been host was one of the disciples. They probably should have volunteered and say, hey, I'll make the arrangements for Jesus, our teacher, and for all of my peers. I'll get the water for the foot washing covered. But I think it was a pride thing. No one wants to be the guy in the office that does the coffee runs because you're going to be doing coffee runs, you think, for the rest of your career. And the disciples are like, if I get the water now, they're going to always expect me to get the water. So no, if they want to wash their feet, they can get their own water. I'm not going to do it. And so it gets left undone. And so they come into this high party, this Passover festival, and they come in with dirty feet. And then imagine their horror in that moment when Jesus gets up mid-meal to start to make the arrangements to wash their feet. No worries. They would be horrified. They would be ashamed. Man, one of us should have done it so that the boss didn't have to. Like, come on. But then he doesn't just get the stuff and say, hey guys, we didn't do this. Come wash your feet. He grabs that servant's towel and he starts to do the dirty work himself. He takes on both the role of host and the role of servant. And he loves his disciples, and he serves them in this way. And the disciples are stunned into silence. They're shocked. They're humbled. They're honored, but they're horrified too. They're a bit uncomfortable. This shouldn't have had to happen. And Simon Peter breaks the silence first. He's never one to keep his mouth shut for long. And he says this. It says in verse 6, Jesus came to Simon Peter, who said to him, Lord, do you wash my feet? And Jesus answered him, what I'm doing, you do not understand now, but afterward you will understand. Peter said to him, you shall never wash my feet. Jesus answered him, if I don't wash you, you have no share in me. Peter is a man who cares about reputation and honor. He won't stand by and watch his teacher, his boss, the leader of their movement, be debased in this manner. He says, Jesus, you're the Messiah. You're the hope of Israel. I'm not going to let you do this glorified janitorial work. We can pay someone to do this. A master should never wash his disciples' feet. We should be washing your feet. Don't let yourself be humbled in this way. If you don't demand respect, how will anyone respect you or respect us as leaders in your movement and your kingdom? Peter won't stand for it. He refuses to receive it. He just can't comprehend Jesus' gospel hospitality. Gospel hospitality. We defined hospitality, but what is gospel hospitality? Well, it's what we see in this passage, and I put this in your sermon notes. Gospel hospitality is costly, self-giving love that elevates another person and allows them to be welcomed in as God's honored guests. Gospel hospitality is costly, self-giving love that elevates another person and allows them to be welcomed in as God's honored guests. Gospel hospitality is what Jesus is all about. It's why he came. I love the symbolism in this passage. Jesus rises up from his place and he takes off his outer garment. Literally, that was his mantle as a rabbi. It was as a mark of authority. But it's also a symbolic, right? This is God's Son who has taken off his mark of authority, his godhood, his power and presence and all of the majesty of who he is, and he picks up a servant's towel. Why? For what purpose? So that we might be elevated, so that we might be washed clean, so that we might be welcomed in as guests of honor in the household of God, so that we might be saved. It's incomprehensible grace. And Jesus' hospitality doesn't just end with foot washing. It ends with Jesus, the ever self-giving host, laying down his life for strangers, for these travelers on the road like you and I, that he's invited to come in and be welcomed, and he calls beloved friends. He's the ultimate host, and he gives of himself to the point of giving of his life on a cross. And the fullness of this good news is just resonating through Jesus' actions in that room. But Peter's a little slow on the uptake. He's starting to understand, but he overcorrects. Instead of receiving that gift in awe, starting to feel entitled, he demands more. And here's what we read in 9. Simon Peter said to him, "Lord, not my feet only, but my hands and my head." And Jesus said to him, "The one who is bathed doesn't need to wash, except for his feet, but is completely clean. And you are clean, but not every one of you." For he knew who was to betray him, and that's why he said, "Not every one of you are clean." Jesus highlights something here that just blows my mind. He's relinquished his honored position. He's humiliated himself to wash the feet of Judas Iscariot, of a friend who is mere minutes away from betraying him to just horrific torture and death. Judas is about to walk out and sell out Jesus to the Jewish authorities for what is basically $3,000 in today's currency. And knowing that, Jesus still chooses to get down and wash his feet. And what's more, he washes the feet of a whole room of men who are about to abandon him in his hour of greatest need. No one there deserved that honor. No one there was worthy of Jesus' gospel hospitality. But Jesus gave of himself freely and sacrificially. And it was as he said, I would love them to the end. And he did that. And then we read in verse 12, when he had washed their feet and put on his outer garments and resumed his place, he said to them, do you understand what I've done to you? You call me teacher and Lord, and you're right, for so I am. If I then, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I have given you an example that you also should do just as I have done to you. Truly I say to you, a servant is not greater than his master, nor is a messenger greater than the one who has sent him. If you know these things, blessed are you if you do them. Jesus is trying to help his disciples understand, to interpret what he's done for them. And he turns this unsettling act of hospitality into a lesson and a final charge for them as leaders in his movement, in his kingdom. So in light of all of this, what do we learn? What can we say about what Jesus has done? Well, the first thing is this, and it's in your sermon notes. Gospel hospitality is a gift to accept. At the end of the day, I have to let Jesus wash my dirty feet. I have to receive his hospitality. It's how we're welcomed in, how we're invited to find a seat at the table in God's household. Jesus says, if I do not wash you, you have no share with me. There's part of me like Peter that doesn't like this. Peter first came into that upper room and he had no desire to acknowledge that his feet were dirty at all. It's like, nope, I'm this natural born leader. I have talent. I have experience. I'm looking at my life. Things are going fine. Nothing smells off to me. Let's get on with the party. But then when Jesus grabs the basin of water, Peter actually looked down at his feet. In that moment, he realized how just disgusting they were from a day on the road. They were filthy. And in that moment, all he wanted to do was to make himself presentable. He desperately wanted to wash his own feet. And I can't blame him. I don't really like looking at my own feet either. They're hairy and usually covered with fuzz from my socks. And I've been a runner for years, so there's calluses and corns, and it's not a pretty sight when you look at it closely. And the same is actually true of my life as well when you analyze it closely. I have destructive habits. I let my emotions get the best of me. I lack love, and I can grow bitter and self-indulgent. And when I'm confronted with these realities, like Peter, I'm desperate to improve myself, desperate to make myself presentable. You may never wash my feet, Jesus. But Jesus says, no, let me wash you and find your share with me. Let me gift you the life and the transformation that you are just so desperate for. Jesus willingly gave of himself so that you and I might be made clean, so that you and I might be welcomed in and find our place in God's new world. Will you accept that gift? Will you offer him your dirty feet and let the transformation and the welcome begin? You see, that's where it starts. Gospel hospitality is a gift we must accept from Jesus. But it doesn't stop there. It's also an example that we're called to follow. That's your second fill-in on those points there. Gospel hospitality is an example to follow. Jesus said, "If I then, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet." And you can't sugarcoat this. It's supposed to be unsettling. I tried to imagine this week what we would do if we took Jesus hyper literally this morning. Last week, Pastor Philip preached, and he's kind of famous for getting you to talk to the person sitting next to you when he's preaching. And I wondered, what if I would be the guy that calls people at random out of the crowd and invites them to come to the stage and wash a fellow believer's feet? So, I imagined what would happen. And what I imagined was that you would run out the back door and never come back. Because to actually wash another person's feet is awkward. It's humbling. There's something uncomfortably intimate about it. You might feel exposed if you're at all self-conscious about your feet. You might feel grossed out if the person that you're asked to wash is all fungally and nasty and gunk under the nails. Even if it was a friend from church, this would be a hard ask. Honestly, you'd probably struggle with it. But that's the point. Jesus' call for us is to practice gospel hospitality that is costly and outside of our comfort zone. That's why we can't get too much further without me reminding you of two things. And these are in your sermon notes. Gospel hospitality cannot be extended to others until God's love for you is first received and internalized. Until you know deep in your soul that you were the person with dirty feet, that Jesus stooped down to wash and to welcome in. How can you expect to find the resources in yourself to wash somebody else's nasty feet? The reason we love is because Jesus first loved us. And without that personal encounter with Jesus, it's just not possible to be a person that washes the feet of another. But furthermore, you cannot experience God's love for you fully if you're not living out this gospel hospitality in community. You'll never grasp the love that God has shown you until you try to demonstrate that self-giving love to someone else, especially to someone who's unlovely or difficult to work with or has betrayed you or abandoned you. We just don't get it yet in our bones what Jesus did for us. But when we choose to live out this call in community, we get this full insight into the depth and breadth of God's grace. Wow, Jesus, when I was still opposed to you, you chose to die so that I might be made clean. It's hard for me to love the challenging person in my life group, yet you paid the fullest price on the cross for me when I was still resisting you at every turn. Thank you for modeling such amazing love and grace. And then we hear his call again. You also ought to wash one another's feet. We can't miss or ignore this. You know why? Because at the end of this chapter, Jesus declares the gospel hospitality is the proof that we're abiding in Jesus and participating in his work on the earth. It's the proof that we're abiding in Jesus and participating in his work on the earth. He ends his instruction that night with these words: "A new commandment I give to you, that you love one another. Just as I have loved you, you are also to love one another. By this all people will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another." Love your brother and sister in the faith. That's not a new command, but what is new here is the standard, the benchmark that Jesus sets. He says, "As I have loved you. I, your Lord and teacher, your Savior, have washed your nasty feet. I went to a cross for you. Show that same love to one another. Love to the point of being a servant. Love to the point of laying down your pride, your agendas, your honor, your very life." It's a high and unsettling call, but it says Jesus says it's the proof that he is in us and we are in him. It shows that Jesus' life is really what is animating us and giving us the strength and resources that aren't our own. It announces to the world that Jesus is still present and working on this earth, even though he's no longer physically walking among us. At the end of the day, this is our Christian calling: to selflessly and sacrificially love one another. And it starts right here with those in this room. And ultimately, it spills out into the world. So it's time to get practical. How will you live out this call this week? I honestly wish it was as easy as the physical act of washing feet. But it's not. Foot washing doesn't have the same power or impact in our culture as it did in Jesus' time. And it's not just about finding some modern kind of equivalent to foot washing. Jesus is not saying, hey, just make each other coffee and carry each other's bags. He's actually calling us to all different sorts of costly, self-giving love. Actions that elevate people and roll out a red carpet for them to be welcomed in as God's guests. How do we show Jesus' gospel hospitality to everyone who comes through these doors, who comes through the doors of our office, who comes through the doors of our homes? And I've been wrestling with this all week in preparation for this morning. And interestingly, God brought, first and foremost, people to my mind. It wasn't about the actions, it was about the people that popped into my head, and he started to ask, how will you show the same love to them? So I thought we have a missionary couple that are visiting with us from Ukraine, James and Tatiana Alderson. You'll get to hear from them in a couple weeks. They're old friends of ours, and I started to think, what does it look like to show the welcome and refreshment of Jesus to them as they sojourn with us for a few months while they're having a baby? I thought as well, actually, of Kathy Chipman, who's our church on-ramps coordinator, and she's the woman behind all the newcomers' lunches and the newcomers' follow-up. She is a gift. She has such a deep heart for the Lord and such a passion to show the welcome and excitement that Jesus has when someone steps onto our campus. But I don't think she sees her value, and I don't think she realizes what a blessing she is. And so Jesus says, how might you this week outdo yourself in showing her honor and the value I have for her? And then I started also to think of the people I don't know yet that are walking through these doors, that are seeking Jesus, that are looking for a community to call home. What does it look like to roll out Jesus' red carpet of welcome to them? What attention or courtesy can I extend to them to communicate how much Jesus loves them and the value he has for them? So I don't entirely have the answers yet, but Jesus did give me my marching orders. I have received God's gospel hospitality. He's washed my feet. And now he's calling me, he's calling you who are believers to go out and extend that hospitality to others. Because that is what he's all about. A costly, self-giving love that brings people in to the very presence of God, where they can find life and renewal, welcome and hope.